Hey guys, Mtashed here, and I wanted to make a quick guide about Gambit. I wanted to talk about some of my biggest and best tips, so let's get into it. I'm just taking some footage from the Gambit stream we did the other day. I wish I had a little bit more specific footage, but a lot of the stuff that I want to talk about is things I've seen during the tournaments, as well as my own playtime. And a lot of it I couldn't record or I don't have good footage. They're changing point of views and things like that. So let's just get into it. Listen to my voice. Watch the stuff in the background. Let's go. Now, when you're invading, you want to make sure you invade when the other team has the gray bar over their score. So if you look at Team Bravo with 57 score, they've got a big gray bar there. Now it's switched over because we're watching Bravo's perspective, but they've got a lot of motes in their inventory. This is when you would want to invade. Or if they've got a few in their inventory, because chances are they're not going to bank those, and that number is going to go up when you start your invasion or during your invasion. The gray bar is how many motes they've got in their back pocket. So if you're invading when they don't have any gray bar, you're essentially invading after they've already put all their motes in the bank or they've died themselves to other enemies. And if you're doing that, you're kind of wasting an invasion because killing them is a minor setback. It doesn't really do that much. Right here, this invasion, they've got 0 motes, none of them motes. They have their Primeval out, but this invasion is not going to be as valuable as if they had 10, 15 motes on their body, because you have to remember that the enemies that spawn are kind of finite. You don't have an unlimited stream of them. They're going to spawn in the ruins, they're going to spawn on the beach, they're going to spawn in the trees, but there's only a certain amount of them that are going to be there. And so when you kill them and you get their motes and you die with those motes, you essentially have to wait for another set of enemies to spawn. And so that can delay you 30, 40, 50 seconds, maybe even a minute and a half by the time it's all said and done, maybe even 2 minutes if you're killing those enemies, picking up the motes, and going to the bank. So you want to make sure that you're invading when there's an actual gray bar, or else it's a little bit wasted. Now, it's different if they have their Primeval out. When a team has their Primeval out, you can invade multiple times every kind of 30 seconds. And it's important to invade then when the Primeval is missing HP, because if you're going and getting 4 kills on them and blowing your super when the Primeval is at full HP, it's a wasted invasion. It does almost nothing for your team other than slowing down the DPS of the other team. You need to make sure that you're getting these kills when the Primeval is taking damage, and that's pretty much all I'm going to say. Now, if you look on the left side of the screen right now, it says Primeval Slayer times 6. The longer the Primeval is out, the more damage you're going to do. This team has times 7. It goes all the way to times 10. So the sooner you can get that Primeval out, the better you are. The more damage you're going to be able to do. You're going to be able to actually burst down the boss because you do so much bonus damage. If I was to recommend anything, because of this buff and how it works, I would not use any of your heavy ammo at the beginning of the burn phase. When the Primeval comes out, don't be using your supers on it. Don't be using your heavy on it, because you're not going to do... Oh, wow. Very handsome guy. Don't be using all your heavy and supers and everything right at the start, because if you do, you're going to be doing far less damage with it. You'd be better off... You would be better off... Jeez, I'm just going to skip ahead here. Sorry, this is annoying to look at. You would be better off saving those heavy burst damage things for when the Primeval Slayer buff is active, because there's going to be situations where someone invades, kills a bunch of you, heals it up, and you don't have any heavy now or any supers because they healed all of that damage with some kills. But if you were just using your primary weapon to weaken it and get it down, then you die and you're back into it, well, you're going to have a big Primeval Slayer buff, and you might be able to burst it down with all the heavy and the supers that you saved. So definitely go for bursting down the Primeval after you've got stacks versus killing it right at the start, because you're not going to be able to do it. You cannot melt it right at the start. It is so damn tanky. The other thing is, when that Primeval comes up, there are other taken enemies that are going to spawn with it, as well as blockers that the other team is sending. Focus on the other adds that are spawning with it, or else you're going to have to deal with an ogre, taken knights, phalanxes, all this stuff at the same time. Don't be doing DPS to the boss right at the start until all of that middle area is cleared of enemies. Trust me, they are a nuisance. They are a pain, especially if you have any of those taken knights that throw the fire. They're going to disrupt your team, and they're actually going to kill you when someone invades. They're going to hit you, they're going to pick you off, they're going to stop your shields from regenerating, they're going to do something to mess with your day. Now, quick beginning of the game tip. There's a couple of tactics I want to talk about. Number one is putting all of the motes on one player as a collector and spamming the other team with blockers. Now, if you let one person collect, like Levine just did and deposited 15 motes, you're going to send a big taken ogre over to the other team. That's really good, but if it's the only enemy, it's really easy to kill that taken ogre. It's not that much of a threat. It honestly is probably one of the easier ones to kill and the least disruptive because everyone focus fires it and it goes down very quickly. But if you send out the ogre with some phalanxes and some knights as well, if you kind of hold on to your motes, it can be pretty frustrating to deal with. Especially if you send that taken ogre out while you're invading, because the taken ogre will not touch you. When you invade, you're essentially an enemy, and so you can dive in with the ogre who's shooting his laser and you're shooting your gun, and it's really, really disruptive. So if you can get a taken ogre out and push with the ogre, you're going to be in a much, much better position. You want to almost time an ogre when you're going to hit 25 points. Because when you have 25 points, the portal opens. Or at 50 points, the portal opens. So that ogre should be going out as an invader is going in. Now, the taken phalanxes, they're only 5 motes. It's very cheap. It's the cheapest blocker you can send over. They're much more annoying than you would think because they have those damn shields. They're sitting there, they're shielding up, and you're not able to bank when there's any sort of blockers. So if you send over a bunch of phalanxes, the other team has to focus fire them, flank around them, try to kill them, and they can be really disruptive. The knight as well is probably, in my opinion, the best to send over because of that stupid fire attack. If you send out a bunch of phalanxes as well as a taken knight or two, it is so disruptive on the map, it's not even funny. He keeps shooting fire, he keeps annoying everyone, and I honestly think that the ogre is the weakest, even though it's the biggest. Unless you do a kind of focus push where multiple phalanxes and ogres and an invader are going through, I would just stick to the small blockers and the knights because it's so frustrating for the other team. And the reason why I say this is because every time they have to deal with these blockers and they're not able to bank, your score is getting closer to that Primeval. And as I said before, with the Primeval buff, if you have the Primeval out first, you're going to be doing more damage to the boss sooner than the other team. So I would focus on getting those motes in, focus on blocking them, focus them from not getting portals, blockers themselves, and invasions, and get your Primeval out as soon as you possibly can. I think that's literally key to winning, is getting that Primeval out in an efficient way. Now, if someone's invading you, I honestly think you need to stop shooting everything and focus on the invader because it's very, very, it's a big setback, right? If you die to that invader, you're giving them super energy, you're losing your motes, you're being a major liability to your team if you're dying to the invader. And while the invader can be really sneaky and is a little bit more tanky, if you team shot and you focus on this invader, you're going to take him out or her out or whoever it is. So definitely focus on that invader. The second you hear, oh, invader's coming, everyone communicate, everyone talk and be like, where is the invader? The issue with most teams not killing the invader is not seeing where it's coming from, not communicating, and also not realizing that the invader isn't going to show up like on your map anywhere because they usually spawn on the outsides of the map, and they show up as a regular enemy on the radar. And so if you see a bunch of phalanxes, there might be an invader right behind a rock near them, and you won't know on the radar because they show up as kind of a regular enemy on the radar. And so if you're not calling out where that invader is coming from, or if no one gets a glimpse of it, they can really sneak in right on top of your team before anyone notices. So when you see that invasion timer happening on the left side, when you know there's an invader in your area, you need to call that shit out ASAP. Same thing goes with if you're invading. Because of how you are going to spawn kind of on the outskirts of the map and there's enemies around, if you kind of push with the enemies through the map, you're going to stay off the radar. No one's going to have any idea where the hell you are until they spot you, and you can make a really good push. You can be really sneaky, really, really sneaky. Now, that's pretty much all I wanted to say for invasions. You can watch True Vanguard here make some plays, get some kills. He's doing really well here on this invasion, loving the movement and the groovement. I would recommend that you send an invader in when the Primeval is getting burned down. Okay? When the Primeval is getting really close to death on your side, send in an invader. Because if you can send an invader and get a couple kills and delay the other team, like if it's Primeval versus Primeval, and yours is really close, you can either try to burst it down, or you can send in an invader and slow the other team down because they're going to focus on you instead of the Primeval. So if it's kind of close, you might want to burn it down. But if they have a full HP bar and you're really low, send an invader over just to mess with them because it's going to make it almost impossible for them to focus on their Primeval and burst him down because you've got an invader in there. If they start doing some good damage, you're going to get some kills and heal it up. And it leaves the 3 players on your team to have almost free reign on that Primeval and hopefully close out the game for you. There are situations where you're all 4 going to have to just rocket it and try to burst it down, but a smartly timed invasion to just mess with the other team can be fantastic. There's one in the last game here. I don't want to skip to it because I don't know if I'm going to find it quickly enough. I might kind of waste some of your time, but there was a time where Miss 5,000 Watts goes in and disrupts them, and their team just melts the Primeval, and it's beautiful. It's really well done. Another thing too is these enemies hit quite hard, very hard. Okay, if you jump into the middle of all of these fallen, they're going to shred you. Okay. And so if you've got 8 motes on you, 9 motes on you, and you dive in willy-nilly, like you can see the HP bars. Every time these enemies shoot you, you're going to be chunked down a little bit. And if you're dying with those motes, as I said before, you're delaying your team like a minute and a half, 2 minutes to get that Primeval out. You're not sending blockers over. You're not getting portals opened. You cannot die to these PvE enemies. We saw 15 motes go down, 9 motes go down, 12 motes go down in this tournament where someone literally just died to a Cabal. Someone died to a fallen captain, and it's not acceptable. Not in a game like this. That death is worse than an invader death. If you die to an invader who's sniping at you and using supers, it's understandable. But if you die to a PvE enemy, you just screwed your team for pretty much free. I'm serious. Like, that is honestly... that should have been tip number 1, is don't die to the PvE enemies because it's just such a colossal mistake. It is literally game ending in some cases, especially if you have 15 motes. It's... whew. And... going into Forsaken, there's other maps, and some of them have some pitfalls, like some holes you can fall in. If you're jumping in those holes and dying, God, you're screwing your team, so you really need to be careful, especially when you have motes. Speaking of motes, speaking of invasions, I know this is a little jumbled. Just listen to my tips, write them down. If you're invading, you have to make sure that you don't have motes on you. So if you're looking at this invader right now, well, not this one. They just switched the thing. But anyways, if you have motes in your back pocket and you invade and you die, you still lose the motes. And lots of people do that. They go and invade when they have motes in their back pocket. And then they die. And then they lose them. Bank your damn motes before you invade. You cannot be invading with 5, 6, 7 motes in your inventory. That's a small blocker that you could have sent to the other team to disrupt them while you're invading. And that's 5 to 7 motes that you're losing during an invasion, the time that you're supposed to be getting ahead. So you need to be very careful about that, is don't get willy-nilly. Just because a portal opens, don't dive through it. I know that there's going to be people very excited to invade, but that's like super important. Do not invade when you have those motes. Call it out, talk to your team, and honestly, have some dedicated invaders early on. If everyone is fighting to get through that portal, no one is focusing on killing enemies and getting motes. No one is focusing on getting that Primeval up, sending blockers, all of these different things. People are going to be very hungry for it. They're going to want to invade. I get it. But if you're seriously all kind of just trying to sneak in and steal it before your friend does, you're going to lose every game you play. I'm telling you right now. Unless you're way, way, way out-tiering your team. If you're one of those greedy guys, if you're one of those greedy teams that can't communicate and everyone's just trying to get into there and invade, it's not a PvP game. PvP matters. Being able to slay other players matters. But a good, well-coordinated PvE team is going to win more games than you would think. Because they're going to team shot those invaders and not die as much as you'd think. And they're going to be much more efficient on getting those motes, summoning the Primeval, and DPS. Okay, so I know you want to get those kills, but it's not as valuable as you think, especially if you're not taking out moats. Like this invasion here, everyone's got 0, right? True Vanguard has 5 moats in his back pocket. If he dies here and he loses those 5 moats, that's going to hurt his team. And even though he might be killing these other players, that's not as important because they don't even have any moats themselves. That's 5 moats. True Vanguard there probably hurt his team more than helped. Okay. Now, that's pretty much the main tips that I have. Other than maybe loadout, if you're going to be focused on killing the PvE enemies, you're not going to be invading. Get a loadout that's going to be better for that. Okay. Grab Whisper of the Worm for the Primeval. Maybe Ikelos Escalation Protocol shotgun or something like that. Okay. Maybe you want like Midnight Coup for a hand cannon. Stuff that's really good for PvE. You want to be focused on that. If you're the main invader, grab whatever weapons you think will kill everyone the best. But I would say that 80% of this game is PvE. 20% maybe is PvP. Okay? You want a loadout that is going to be best for what you're focused on. And support roles in this game, such as the Well of Radiance on the Sun Singer. I can't even think of the name. Yeah. The Dawnblade? Yeah, that's the one. Dawnblade. Well of Radiance is awesome because it heals you while you do extra damage. There's going to be some other supers coming in Forsaken that are going to be really good. Don't sleep on the kind of support classes. Just because you're used to using supers that kill other people doesn't mean that the support classes aren't going to be good. You almost got to treat this like a raid. Now, I think I've gone over time a little bit here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully this was slightly insightful for you. And I will see you guys very, very soon. Enjoy Gambit. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.